Today we are very fortunate to have Mr. Greg Reese with us from Reef Point. We've all heard of DST, so Greg Reese is the other DST. And what Greg brings to the table is when individuals, when we're dealing with folks selling their land, selling their property, and to defer capital gains, almost everybody's heard of a 1031 exchange. A 1031 exchange is a very limited, there's 45 days of identification and 135 days to close from the date of closing of escrow one asset to get another asset. The problem is, which we've all run into, is that 45-day identification period is almost impossible to find something for them, and the clients sometimes end up in a position where all that sale of the property ends up as boot, and they get taxed quite heavily. Greg's company, which is Deferred Sales Trust, did I get that right?
That's the name of the strategy.
Yeah, is an alternative to a 1031 and helps that client defer their taxable gains in taxable position. In addition, Greg's company can also help someone that's in a 1031 exchange that's failing and help save them from the failure of a 1031. So Greg started the business in real estate with his family and has moved into this venue. So he's not unfamiliar with our trials and tribulations as agents and principals and practitioners within this business.
Absolutely.
All yours, sir.
All right, thank you, Greg. I guess I'll stand and make sure everybody can see me and the video going the way it needs to be. So nice to meet everybody. Thanks for having me over and join you. Greg, kind enough to invite me to help teach you about a legal, proven, and IRS tested strategy that is called the Deferred Sales Trust. We use the acronym DST all the time, not to be confused with the other DST, which is the Delaware Statutory Trust. So the Deferred Sales Trust is effectively a way to defer short and long-term capital gains when you're selling a highly appreciated asset. I'm going to give you some education about kind of what it is and try to apply it to your world and how it can actually benefit you in growing your business and your practice and serving your clients by adding a new tool. It's kind of like in the business, and as Greg said, I was a real estate professional for 15 years. We have a family, the real estate family. My father, 89 years old this year. He's still got his real estate broker's license. He doesn't have to take the test anymore, the continuing education. He's been at it so long. So I go, when do I get to that point? Because I just finished all my CE a few weeks ago, and I'm just 45 hours I had to cram into about 2 weeks. so that was kind of fun. But anyway, the Deferred Sales Trust, one of the things that's kind of unique about this is that it's not new, it's just new to a lot of people. So our tax team, so the Deferred Sales Trust is basically a tax strategy designed to do what I said, defer ordinary and long-term capital gains. It's been around for over 25 years now. So when I say it's not new, it's just new to a lot of people. It's highly specialized, highly niche. Our tax team developed this strategy around this particular IRS code section 453. I'll tell you a little bit about that because you guys deal with it every day. We just have created something that's a lot more flexible and interesting than the typical use of a 453 structure. But I'll give you a little bit of an idea of what this is used for. Primarily, what folks gravitate to use the Deferred Sales Trust for, and I'll use DST a lot in my vernacular just to keep it simpler, but people will use this as an exit strategy, as an alternative to a 1031 exchange, or as a rescue from a failing 1031 exchange. Those are the primary lanes that we operate in for most people. The type of assets that we work with are a lot of business sales, a lot of real estate sales. It will be the two primary categories, but this can also be used for high value collectibles, cryptocurrency, intellectual property, people that have music, rights and authors and musicians and You know, I've got clients in all of these walks of life, which makes this a very interesting job. But so it can be used for any of those types of things. In the real estate space, any investment property, it can even be used for a highly appreciated personal residence where the growth or the appreciation on that property well exceeds the 121 section exclusions of the $250,000 or $500,000 that people have. And of course, we all live in an area where there's a lot of folks that are in that position. I live down in Newport Beach, so I'm surrounded by people in that situation. So, and then let me give you sort of the minimum viable transaction. Get to kind of the meat, some of the bullet points. Who is this effective for? Well, we're only working with sellers, so there's one. And for this to be economically viable for a given seller, you look at the transaction, the sale transaction, and what would the tax outcome be for them if they just sold the property and just took the cash? What would they owe in taxes? Just look at it that way. If their tax bill from federal, state, and Obamacare taxes would be at least $100,000 or more upon selling it, then that meets the threshold for the DST to be considered, and it should definitely be considered. I'm going to go back to really the 3 lanes really quick, so you guys have a flavor for this. Exit strategy is pretty self-explanatory. You know, if it's real estate or a business owner that built their business, they want to retire, replace income, and move on to the next chapter in their life or their lifestyle. It could be a real estate owner that's tired of being a landlord. You know, they just don't want to be in real estate anymore, or they don't like the laws or the things that are going on, and they want to get out of that asset class and not necessarily reinvest back into it. So those are examples of exit strategies. 1031 alternative means that somebody could be interested in selling investment real estate and reacquiring new investment real estate, trading up, which commonly we think of the 1031 exchange. The DST can be used as an alternative to a 1031 exchange. Same person wants to sell their investment property and trade up into more investment property, they could use the DST as their vehicle. Why might they? Number one, the DST operates on a completely different code section, 453, not 1031. It allows the seller to park their money and wait for the right opportunity, and not just what might show up that fits their needs within that short 45-day identification window. Number two, the DST may be more advantageous for a client who has depreciated their existing property, or maybe they've previously exchanged into what they have now they're selling it to trade up again. But if they've depreciated their property back to the first leg of their investment, my rule of thumb is about 15 years or more. You're really taking a lot of those depreciation write-offs. You may look at the DST as a better vehicle to buy the next investment property, because when you exchange property, as you all probably know, you have to exchange that basis along with it. So if you've taken a $500,000 property that you bought and you've depreciated it down to $150,000, that $150,000 adjusted basis follows you to the next property. And so you get a lot fewer tax write-offs against your income or other income on the upside that you're getting. With the DST, if you use this to buy the next property, you get a complete depreciation basis reset, as though it's the first investment property you're buying. So whatever the market value is, the purchase price, the percentage of that represents the depreciable building portion of it, you get a whole depreciation basis reset, which can mean a lot, because that can be significant additional tax benefits or write-offs against your income. Make sense? Okay, so that's the 2 key features of using the DST as a 1031 exchange alternative. 1031 exchange rescue really applies when, same situation, I'm selling my investment property, I want to test the waters. I always say test the waters of the 1031 exchange, because it's not automatic, right? It's not automatic that you're going to find what you want. Inventory has been horrible for the last few years, right? So people have really been in a crunch. So you might want to test the waters of the 1031 exchange. You can use the DST as a backup strategy. In other words, it's kind of like getting in the car. We're all agents or have been agents, and we've driven people around looking at property and all that kind of stuff. pick up the DST, pick up your trustee, which is my role. Let me sit in the back seat with you, as your backup strategy. If you can't find ideal replacement property within the 45 days, or you're engaged with an offer, but something happens along the way and you're not going to be able to close in time, which would result in you paying taxes, the DST can be used to rescue you from that situation. So that so the money can come out of that 1031 exchange directly into your DST trust, and that deferral can last, as long as you need it to, and you have plenty of options at that time. You can keep looking for your replacement property. You got all the time in the world to do so, or you may decide that you want the money to be reinvested in other asset classes while you wait for the right opportunity. Or maybe you want to decide, okay, I just don't want to be a landlord anymore. So a lot of flexibility and choices are still available. And one of the key differences between a 1031 and a Deferred Sales Trust or DST is that the proceeds of sale can be reallocated in any asset classes without restriction or limitation. That means that you can have your funds invested under the client's direction and approval into a myriad of financial instruments, equities, bonds, ETFs, managed funds, insurance products, you name it, or it can be reinvested back into investment real estate, buy, build, or start a business, do hard money lending, just to name a few. But like I said, there's no restriction or limitation as long as whatever the proceeds are placed into is a bona fide investment. So the only things that really can't be used for using tax deferred dollars is to buy a home that you want to live in. Buy a boat, go on the dock on your lake house in Big Bear or something like that. Things that are designed really for personal use and enjoyment. You can take money to buy those things out of the DST, but you can't use tax deferred dollars to buy those things. But you can use tax deferred dollars to buy more real estate, for example. So this is kind of an important point, and I'll kind of mix it around a little bit because I want to provide value and tell you what this could, because let me give you kind of one of my experiences as a real estate professional. So I worked with my father, who was a broker, and he at the knee of the master, right? Taught me everything I knew about real estate, and we did a lot of work in multifamily. That was primarily what I was engaged in, and so I was actively involved in lots and lots of 1031 exchanges at the time. Well, this is not going to be new to anybody in this room, but when you're involved in a 1031 exchange, the first issue is getting the client off the fence, ready to move to the next. When it's time to move to the next exchange, getting that client to become a seller and get off the fence. What is one of the biggest stumbling blocks or hurdles that client has in making that decision? Fear of the tax consequences if you don't get what you want. So here's my experience. So I've got a client, we're ready to, we've got enough equity built up, we're ready to move on to the next exchange. And we start talking about it. You go, yeah, I think you're right. We're ready. It goes, tell you what's out there? What's on the marketplace right now that we could exchange into? Because you got to realize that there may be a certain level of inventory out there, but only a small fraction of it really is suitable for you. You need something at a certain price point. You need to replace debt at a certain level. All of that kind of stuff. So they want to ask me, what's out there? He goes, I know, we can't tie it up and all that kind of stuff. I just want to know what's out there that I potentially could exchange into. And so you go to work and you give him a list of properties and he does drive by, right?
If you're smart, you find your exchange property before, and even if you have to take some sort of an option on it, you tie it up so that when you do your 1031 exchange, it's there for you.
See, that's an experienced man right there. If you can do that, that's great. You can't always do that,
no,
though, because sometimes it's not even there at this point. But my experience was, at first they say, I know, it's just like, I know you can't tie it up. And then you give them a list of properties, they do drive-bys, and they find something like, oh, I really like that one. Can you make an offer? Can you tie it up? I'm just like, it's just not going to work that way. Too many people are after the same product. They're not going to take the contingency of you're not even listed yet, let alone in escrow, so that's going to be a tough sell. And so, that was one issue. But if I had known about this at that time, I said, look, Sure, I'll give you an idea of what's listed right now. Understand we can't tie it up right now, it's too soon to be able to do that. But what I can do is I can provide you an insurance policy that won't cost you a dime. If we can't find ideal replacement property within the 45 days, you won't pay taxes. If we can't close within 180 days, you don't have to pay taxes. Deal? Will that, will you sign the listing at this point? Because here's the challenge that I faced. Sometimes when I was working with a seller, an exchange client, we couldn't always find ideal replacement property. Now, knock on wood, I never had an exchange actually fail. But nationally, statistically, about 20 to 30% of all 1031 exchanges fail, either partially or fully. It's a pretty big number, right? So I actually coined a term back in the day that goes something like this. Joe, be my client, goes, sometimes you just gotta hold your nose and close. Because the property that fits your particular situation may not be ideal, may not be as nice as what you just sold, may not be in the area that you love, but it's all there is right now and the clock is ticking. Sometimes you gotta hold your nose and close or risk having to pay taxes, which means you're gonna go backwards in your real estate, growth and not forward, right? So you don't wanna take 2 steps back to go 1 step forward. So hold your nose and close was a phrase that that I coined at the time, and that did happen. I mean, I'm sure it's happened to a lot of you. What if you could tell your client, not only do you have all the time in the world, if you find something you love within that 45 days, we're gonna move on that, we're gonna get that done. But if we can't find something that's ideal for you, we have all the time in the world. And knowing about this strategy gives you an edge in the marketplace. Because your competitors, by and large, don't know about this yet. Even though it's been around for more than 25 years, because we're the only group that really does this, we haven't really got the word out to everybody yet, but it is growing in awareness and popularity, dramatically these days. But it still provides a really nice opportunity to have another arrow in that quiver of your tool, of your tools that you can bring to the clients. And it takes a lot of pressure off of you. Here's another thing that I found. When I'm working with an exchange client and we're moving on the upside property, always 2 sets of negotiations involved in that upside acquisition, aren't there? The first one is you get the pro forma, you look at the numbers, you drive by the property, you take a look, client looks, say, this looks great, let's make an offer. Then you go into the due diligence phase and the inspections and all that kind of stuff. And invariably you find stuff that's wrong or needs fixing or it wasn't as you expected. And so negotiation round 2 comes into play, where you go back to that seller and you're looking for price reductions, credits, repairs, replacements, things of that nature, right? Well, that seller knows that you're in a 1031 exchange. They're not exactly eager to renegotiate with you because in their view, they've kind of got you over a barrel, because if you don't buy their property, you're probably gonna pay taxes. So they don't really have to be that flexible, and usually they are not, in my experience. Now, as the agent, what if you could say to the seller, or the seller broker says, I know what you're thinking, that if we don't just buy this as is, we're gonna suffer taxes. I just need to let you know, whatever happens here, we're not paying taxes. We have got an insurance policy for that, and it's not gonna happen. So either we can negotiate in good faith, everybody gets what they need out of this, or we can walk away tomorrow. It's not a problem. What do you wanna do now? You just change the whole negotiation dynamic. Instead of being at the bottom of the hill looking up at the guys pointing down at you, you now are at the top of the hill. You've got the leverage at that point, because you can walk. They can lose their buyer, and their leverage has disappeared, right? So 2 important aspects for you, just to kind of summarize that. Number 1, how do you get a potential seller off the fence when they're fearful of the tax burden and the risk associated with that? Because if I don't find what I want, there's a couple things that are going through their mind. If I don't find what I want or I can't close, I'm gonna have to pay all this tax, and I've already sold there's no going back. You can't unwind this thing. The other thing is, I might not find a great property. I may have to go backwards in terms of the quality or the location of what I buy versus what I sold, and that's of concern to everybody. It really is. If you can take both of those issues off the table, how many more listings and sales can you generate? How many more clients can you attract through referrals because you did a deal like this with somebody and they tell their friends? Because one thing I've learned about real estate investor community is they talk to each other, don't they? How big is the Apartment Owners Association in this county?
5,000 members?
It's huge.
Yeah.
Every county's like that, everywhere. It's huge, they talk. If you're the guy that brings solutions, because the whole idea is, like, back when I was in real estate, it was largely a transactional business, right? Things have changed a lot since then. I mean, when I first started, I think there was a 3-page deposit receipt. What is it now, 17 or 22 or something like that. There were 3, and then went to 5, then it went to 7. And
It gets bigger next week.
you know, and it gets bigger next week. So it was largely transactional, but I think if you can kind of elevate your game to become more of a problem solver for your clients, bringing solutions to the table and being the quarterback and being the one that gets recognized for bringing those solutions, and that's an important aspect of how we work. You know, so when we're partnering or working with, you know, professionals in the financial services space, which includes real estate professionals, business brokers, CPAs, things of that nature, we want to make sure that, you know, any prospective client you bring to us for a consultative, you know, appointment or interview, that you're always front and center. You know, we're a part of your team. You're not referring out and hoping for the best. So just a little small piece about kind of how we work and how we integrate with folks. It's like, we don't want you to refer out and hope for the best. That never works. You know, it takes your, and if it works out really well for the client, you don't get credit for it. It doesn't come back to you. Oh, that guy was great, you know, and then they forget about you. But if you're part of those appointments, you're part of those meetings, you've got a partner that's really talking you up as a solution provider. And if you know anybody else that might benefit from this, call Chip. Start with Chip. Start with Greg. You know, whoever, right? And I'm only picking you guys because you're right here. I can touch you. But so that's just a really important aspect, I think, professionally, because you can use this, you know, in your marketing. You've got your social media links and stuff like that. What about the marketing you do, your social media, your websites? What if you add content in these areas? What if you work with a partner that can give you materials to send out for email campaigns and things on your website to generate leads and appointments? I own investment property in Orange and LA County, so every week I'm getting a call from a realtor, every week. They all have this, they all say the same thing. They all say the same thing. You know, just wondering if you're interested in buying or selling, you know, whether it's my house or my investment property, but it's the same thing. And if you actually reach out to owners and stuff like that, what if you could bring something new to the table? You know, such as, hey, you know, I'm so-and-so with XYZ Realty, I'm a professional business broker or business, you know, real estate professional in your area, I deal with blah, blah, blah. It's just like, your property on such and such, is there any interest in selling that property or exchanging that property in the near future? You're just like, they don't typically say no because you just want to get you off the phone. It's just like, well, let me ask you something. What if, you know, would one of the current concerns for not selling maybe the tax implication that could follow if you can't exchange on time, or you want to get out but you don't want to pay the taxes? Yeah, well, what if we could take that problem off the table? What if I could show you a way to defer the capital gains? It doesn't have to involve a 1031 exchange. Could, but it doesn't have to. But you're protected either way. Would that make a difference? And they're like, that's interesting, tell me more. That's what you want, right? Because the whole idea of marketing, you know, if we're gonna shift to marketing, is just generate a conversation with a qualified prospect. That's all it is. The first stage of marketing is all you want to do is sit down and have a cup of coffee or have a meaningful conversation over the phone. Meet, you know what I mean? So this gives you a way to bring something new to the table that's of interest that they want to learn about. And you don't have to become an expert in this thing. That's why we're here. So you partner with us, you can give them materials and highlights that we can help you with, but you can set up appointments where you and your client or prospect can have a Zoom interview or an in-person interview or something like that, and we can teach them about it and analyze how this might work for them in their situation. So a little bit about that. So and I think I mentioned a little bit of the track record, you know, over 25 years. One of the main reasons why there's not dozens or hundreds or even thousands of other tax attorneys or firms in this space trying to replicate what we do is because it takes years and years and years to get the requisite scrutiny, such as from the IRS, to prove out the model, so to speak. Because the IRS, you know, you can't write them a letter, submit your plan to them and let them weigh in and tell you what they think. They don't work that way. They wait until you know, they like to give you enough rope, right?
Yeah.
Is the old expression. So they'll wait at least 10 years in most cases. If you're doing something that's a little bit unique, they'll give you about 10 years, try to do a bunch of business, and then they keep tabs on you. And then they kind of swoop in and they say, we'd like to you know, they'll do some audits of your cases, see what looks like there, and then they'll go directly to you and say, we'd like to review like the last 10 years of your transaction records and meet with you in person to kind of go over them. You can explain to us what you're doing and why you think it's legal, you know, start that way. So we've been through that, and that's the reason why you don't really see anybody else trying to replicate what we do. They started out, we've done north of 4,000 transactions in that period of time, totaling $200 billion or more in closed transactions. 16 field audits where the IRS identified, that's the poking and prodding, right? And then about 12 years in, they invited us for that week-long review of 10 years worth of records. So that was in 2008. So it took 12 years from when we really started getting this going until we get that deep dive. So we've had 3 IRS direct reviews now, the big deep dive one, and then they do follow-ups. Every few years they'll do a follow-up because they want to find out if you're adding any new ingredients to the recipe, so to speak, that they wouldn't like. But the IRS has looked at this deeply over the last 25 years. They've approved it every single time they've looked at it. We have never had a single adverse finding for any of our 4,000 plus clients. So knowing that there's a solid track record behind it, we've had some of the top tax and CPA firms in the country do independent reviews for us and give us their conclusion. Do you think it's legal, proven, sufficiently IRS tested, and more important in that space, would you recommend it to your own clients that had a need in this area? And to affirm, they said yes. FINRA, who oversees and supervises every licensed investment advisor in the country, they did their own independent deep dive like the IRS because they wanted to make sure that this wasn't some sort of a scam or an offshore trust scam of some sort, because investment advisors are called upon to help manage money in a lot of cases. And if this was not legit, that'd give a whole black eye to the financial services industry, and it's quasi-government, private, right, FINRA and SEC. So from a track record standpoint, we've got a tremendous track record going for you. So, you know, in terms of, you know, we talk a little bit about primary residences, because a lot of people don't think about that, but we all live in an area where a lot of folks have lived in their houses for a long time. They've appreciated it a great deal. If they've lived in their house for at least 2 years out of the 5 preceding the sale, they qualify for the Section 121 exclusion, which means that single person's on title, $250,000 exclusion on top of your basis is applied. If you're married, $500,000. That's great. But what if you bought a house out in Yorba Linda for $500,000 and you're married, and now it's worth $2 million? You know, you can get your 121 exclusion, so you've got $1 million, right? But it's worth $2 million. You got tax exposure on another $1 million. You know, maybe they want to buy another residence, maybe they don't. Who knows? Maybe they want to transfer their property tax basis, you know, under the new Prop 19, replacing Prop 13. They're not going to budge. Maybe they need to. Maybe they want to downsize. Maybe the kids are all grown and gone. They got the 2-story house. You know, they'd like to do it, but the tax issue is keeping them down. What if you could help take that tax problem off the table? So this is suitable for that kind of situation as well. And it also is a very interesting way to have a friendly dissolution of a partnership. So what if you come across a seller who is a co-owner with 1 or more other people, right? In most cases, if they want to move up into more real estate, it's kind of a all or nothing deal. In most cases, not every case, but in most cases, everybody's got to kind of move together to exchange or whatever. But at some point in time, people have different objectives, different ideas, and they don't all want to do the same thing, right? So the DST is actually a way to help people that co-own property or business to be able to chart their own destiny without having any negative impact on their partners. So if they're selling a building and one of the three partners really doesn't want to do an exchange, but the other two really do, that partner can get out, defer his taxes, have the money reinvested into more liquid investments for maybe a passive income for themselves. The other two can pursue real estate either on their own or together. Doesn't matter. So we can deal with any kind of ownership structure, whether it's owned in your name, in your living trust, in an LLC, even sometimes in a sub-S corporation, which, you know, as most of us should know, that's a horrible way to own real estate, but it was kind of one of the ways they used to do it. But we can take any kind of structure and we can allow individual owners to chart their own course destiny and not be tied at the hip till they're apart. So it's an easy way to dissolve a partnership in a friendly manner without, you know, repercussions or recriminations, like you don't want to go with us and do the exchange and you're dead to us now, or whatever the case may be. This is an easy way to kind of solve that problem. So again, this is problem solving mentality and problem solving thinking. How do you understand what their objections are? How do you understand what their concerns and fears are? What kind of solutions can you bring to the table? So what we find is the taxes are a huge issue. But it's also one of the things that a lot of, you know, honestly, a lot of real estate professionals and a lot of business broker professionals, they don't talk about the tax problem. You know, you got to talk to your CPA about that. You know, taxes are a fact of life. Can't really do anything about it. Maybe there's some other stuff that he can recommend to mitigate that a little bit. I don't know. Talk to them. Push them away. You don't want to talk about it. Why don't you talk about it? You don't talk about it because you don't have a solution. What if you had a solution? That puts you in the driver's seat. That elevates your value to those clients and those prospects exponentially. Because if you can totally take that fear off the table, what can you accomplish? How can you leverage that to meet new prospective clients and to engage with clients that you've worked with before who are ready for the next move? And to get them comfortable to take that step off the edge, right? Because that's kind of what it's like for a lot of these people. They're taking a step, leap of faith off the edge. I hope you can find what I'm looking for. But think about this, the pressure, I felt a lot of pressure dealing with exchange clients because of the short timelines and windows, right? The need to replace debt. What if the client had bad credit in the middle of that thing and they couldn't get financing? Or loans, or whatever, or maybe the interest rates are high. Or the other issue is, when you exchange, you're always buying into the same market you sold out of, right? Because markets don't change in 45 days, and that's how much time you have to figure out what the next thing is.
Two quickies. Can you work anywhere in the US?
Yes.
Okay. Can you take, you know, California's clawback, you sell your commercial property, you buy into another property, they want to take the money when you sell that property, even though it's out of state. Can you handle that situation, that clawback?
Well, yes and no. So, this is federal law. IRS Code Section 453. Constitutionally, every state has to conform to federal law. They can't pass a law that completely differs from what the federal law says. So they have to conform. So we can defer the taxes at the state level as well. The state does still have a clawback. But here's what a lot of my clients have done. They're moving out of states like New Jersey and California. They're selling their property, let's just say California, and then they're moving to Nevada, Texas, Tennessee, or Florida, which is no state income taxes. We structure an installment because this is basically a specialized version of an installment sale. So in the real estate world, we all refer to that as a seller carryback, right? So let me kind of take a little bit back step to answer your question. In the seller carryback world, which is a type of installment sale under Section 453, but when you enter into a carryback, it creates new risk for your seller and new leverage for your buyer. And that includes, for example, The seller's risk is that the only collateral they have for repayment of the money that they're carrying back is the asset they used to own and no longer control. And therefore they don't know if the new buyer is going to take as good a care of it as they did, because the fear is I may have to foreclose. If you stop making payments to me, I got to foreclose. My income stops. Probably have to spend money fixing it up. I got to spend money remarketing and paying commissions and title and escrow and all that kind of fees, and and I got no income in the meantime while this is happening. What if the buyer wants to renegotiate the terms? You know, they kind of have you over a barrel. It's like, well, you can say no, but maybe I'll go to the bank and refinance and take you out. Nothing the seller can say about that. Now they're back to square one. They're staring at the tax problem, and there's no way they can stop that. What if they just simply go to a financial institution and refinance and take you out? There's nothing you can do about that either. You're going to get stuck holding the bag. So that creates a little bit more precarious situation for the seller. So one of the features of the DST is it removes those limitations and risk factors and puts the control back in the hands of the seller. So now, what some people end up doing is we structure a note. So it's like a seller careback. You got a term, you got a payment amount, when it begins, and you've got an interest rate tied to it, right? Just like a seller careback, a promissory note is involved. And you also have collateral, right? So when you do a seller careback, your collateral is the property you sold. You got a deed of trust on that. You got protection. At least you got some protection. With the DST, you also have protection, but the protection now is usually more liquid and more diversified. You can get at it a lot quicker. If something goes wrong, you don't get your payments from your trustee and you want to quote foreclose, it takes days or weeks, not months. Easy to get at your money. You can demand it all transferred over to you. Doesn't have to even be sold, whatever it's invested in. Just turn over the accounts to me. You're in breach of your agreement with me. Super easy. So not a big deal. But in creating your note, just like getting a mortgage, there's 101 ways you could structure it. So these are always designed around what the client's needs are. Do you need a certain amount of income? Do you need walking around cash at the close? Do you not need any income for a while because you're fine? Do you want to leave your money working for you in a tax advantage environment until you're ready to turn on your income spigot, for example, right? So all of these things are possible, and it can be changed over time. And so what a lot of people that I work with, what their ultimate goal is, when I've sold my asset, I want stable, consistent income, and I want hopefully for the underlying principal to grow over time. That's kind of a very common goal. I want income and growth. And so they may just set up an interest-only payment of some sort, taking 4%, 5% worth of their original starting principal. And let's just say that we structure the note around that. So this is technically a partial or full interest-only payment to them with a balloon payment at the end of however many years they want to structure this note. Then they pull up stakes in California, they move to Texas or Florida or Nevada. They're collecting their interest payments. They don't owe California a dime because they pay taxes on the interest based on their state of residency at that time. So if I've moved to one of these income tax-free states like Nevada, Texas, Florida, Tennessee, they're paying income taxes at their state of residency. The rate just happens to be zero in those particular states. You'll pay federal tax, but you're not paying California anything. Now, at whatever point in time, which could be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 40 years down the road, you want to also start dipping into the principal of your note, then California is going to get a clawback, but only based on the amount that you're actually drawing of the principal. But if you're somebody that just wants to clip coupons and grow your principal and just take income, like interest income, you could push California out years and years and years. And oftentimes there's three basic tax savings. Number one, the ability to defer taxes gives you the opportunity to keep the money you otherwise would have paid in taxes in the year of sale, working directly for your benefit, for higher income or faster wealth accumulation or a combination of both, because you're not having to dilute your investment nest egg with the tax bill that's going out the door, number one. Number two, if you are in a taxable situation when you sell, more than likely you're going to be at the highest tax brackets. If you're a California resident, you're looking at potentially a 37.1% tax rate. But what if you decide instead to use the installment method of selling using the DST? What if you got $1 million coming out of your transaction, but you really only need $50,000 a year to supplement your retirement? You know, you can save, you'll pay tax just on the 50 that you take, but you can save 10 to 15% tax bracket. That's another savings for you. What about the capital gains? When do I pay those? Whenever you want to. You can do it incrementally over time, depending on how you want to be drawing money for your personal needs, or you can push it out decades. There is no date certain when the taxes have to be paid.
And if you leave this to your trust, what do the trustees get stuck with?
If you leave it to your trust, it's just another asset of your estate. So if you have a living trust, and we strongly recommend that every client has a living trust, because your DST note is an asset, just like your home, your bank account, your brokerage account. These are all assets that are tied in your living trust. We want to tie the DST to that too, so that if something happens to you, your successor trustee is now in charge of the decisions that you had while you were still alive. So to the extent they want to change the investment structure, they want to change the amount of the note, they want to accelerate it and take all the money and pay taxes, they can do that. They want to extend it for additional periods. It can last through the generations if you want it to. Okay.
Does the DST, like a piece of real property at the time of passing and transitioning from one generation to the next, also receive a step up in cost basis or no?
Depends. So generally speaking, there's no step up in the trust, generally speaking, because step up only occurs when an owner of an appreciated asset dies. Okay. If you sell your property before you die, you don't get a step up then, right? Because you're taking the early out, and that's where capital gains comes in. You're subject to capital gains. But if you die owning that home or that building or whatever, or you leave it to your family, yes, they do get a step up in basis. Now, so generally speaking, when you've sold your asset, you've got a capital gains exposure. What we're doing is helping you defer and benefit from deferring the capital gains so that you can keep that money working directly for your benefit, right? At the end of the day, that what you own, the asset that you own, is really characterized as personal property as opposed to real property. Personal property doesn't get a step up in basis. Like your bank account, if it just made interest for 20 years and it grew, there's no step up in basis on that. You know, it's just interest. It's like personal property. Real estate, stocks, businesses, they can appreciate. Collectibles, valuable art, stuff like that. That can appreciate and you can get step up in basis. Now, when can you get a step up in basis? So let's say you use the DST and you want to use tax deferred money to buy another investment property. When we do that, we use the DST and partner with you. We create like a small mini syndication. We usually, in order to do this, because what the trust can't do is loan you money directly or indirectly without that being treated as a taxable distribution to you, which kind of would defeat the purpose of the goal of what we want to do. So to avoid that from happening, we create a manager-managed LLC so that the trust, which is by design created to be independent from you, separate tax-paying entity, separate from you, can partner with you in a real estate venture. So it's just like any partnership, any mini syndication you can think of, just very vanilla, very clear cut. We got an LLC, the DST comes in as a minority partner, 20% ownership. You're the 80% majority partner. So your consideration for getting 80% is identifying the asset and providing the day-to-day management and all the decisions regarding operating that asset. So you find the property, you manage the property, you make decisions around the property. You got an 80% personal ownership. Your living trust ideally would be that 80% member. The trust comes in with the money. So what is it contributing? It's contributing the money for the down payment or the all cash purchase, whatever it is that you want to do. And then during periods of operation, you're distributing the cash flow. 80% of that net cash flow goes to you, 20% of that net cash flow goes to the trust. What do you do with yours? Whatever you feel like. It's your money. Do whatever you want. what does the trust do with its 20% share of the income? Well, just like the income from all the assets, however they're invested, that is designed to deliver on the income, on the promissory note that the client wants, and to ultimately deliver all of their principal back, plus an attractive rate of return. So theoretically, you could be getting 100% of that cash flow, because even though you distribute 20% to the trust, we could create the note so that 20% comes right back to you. But you follow it mechanically, so it's an arm's length legitimate thing. You know, we're both independent partners in this thing, you manage it, and that's what we do. If you don't need the extra income coming your way, then that 20% drops into other more liquid diversified investments that you have approved for the trust to invest into. It can go into that portfolio to provide diversification, liquidity, and emergency funds in case something goes wrong, like COVID, you know. I can tell you a COVID story. I bought 8 units right before, November before COVID hit, and kicked everybody out to rehab them, put them on the market for rent March 1st. In 2020. Talk about nervous time, right? Luckily, I was more conservative than I was telling Chip that I used to be. I had plenty of reserves to weather the storm, and I got the bank to defer payments on the loan for several months, and it all worked out beautifully, but could have been scary. And I'm sure you guys have clients that could have done that too. So anyway, that's kind of how we do that. And the other issue in that is, even though the trust and you share ownership interest in that LLC, and therefore the property, 80% economic interest for you, 20% for the trust. We create the operating agreement so all of the depreciation write-offs are applied to your share, personal share, because the trust really doesn't need it. We already have tax offsets that we can use at the trust level, so the trust doesn't pay taxes anyway. So we assign all the depreciation write-offs for you. That means whatever income streams coming from that property, it's probably all going to be sheltered, plus maybe some leftover to shelter other income, which is a great outcome. And what if you die while you and the trust own this property in this LLC? You get a step up in basis on your 80% share. So that was my long-winded answer to the step up question, because it all starts with it depends, right? So does that make sense to everybody?
I've been speaking Greek the last several minutes, so some of us are unsophisticated as far as tax.
Oh, come on, Lou.
Comes to
You're the
taxes.
guy that has the option idea. Come on, I know you.
Yeah, what would really be helpful is if you had some literature that compared the 1031 and the 2 DSTs, and the advantage and disadvantage of each.
I do. Matter of fact, I have some handouts today that give you some bullet points and some thoughts about this. I'll just kind of share what
Then
they
you
are.
need a good tax
We can
attorney.
hand them out. This first one is really just sort of we just call it a white paper, just a single sheet that gives you a little bit of description on what this is, possible transaction types, kind of assets that you could use it for, summary of the benefits for the clients, and an optional 1031 exchange, rescue, bailout, exit strategy, or simple way out. So it talks a little bit about a comparison, but we can always email some other specific stuff to like Greg, and he can forward it to the group. But why don't you take one and pass those along, and then on this side, we'll start on this side, we've got a little bit of a handout, and this talks about, really, the first side just talks about the process. What are the stages of doing a DST? So we kind of walk through sort of the 5 stages of how this works. On the back side, we give you an example of kind of what happens with your money after you sell, depending on what your needs, your client's needs are. If they need income, they don't need income. How much do they need? When do they want it to start? Do they need any money right away? Because they only pay taxes on what they take. Let me give you a quick analogy. Because this is new, and it'll be new for your clients as well, and again, I don't expect you guys to be experts on this, but just knowing enough, we've got a video that's 2.5 minutes long on our website. You can share a link with clients. It's the greatest way to get a conversation started. Let me share this video with you. It gives them the 30,000 foot view of what the DST can do for them, and then you can kind of follow that up with, what did you think? Would you like to learn more, and how it might impact you or benefit you in your specific situation? And they always say yes. They always want to learn more. So there's plenty of tools for that. But what this does, it says, once you've actually engaged with the DST and it's closed, we've got two tracks. So you'll see it starts with the DST. We'll assume the deal is closed and the DST has the money. This is, if the client wants the funds to be invested really on the financial side with our financial advisor partner, which is the third member of our fiduciary team, tax attorney, trustee, licensed investment advisor, you can go ahead and send those around that way. But if they want to go that direction, that's just a kind of an example of some of the assets. If they want to go back into real estate, take this fork. This gives you a little flow chart of what that looks like. So what I just described, it talks about, and we just, for simplicity, we call in-network investments and out-of-network investments. In-network just simply means, what can the licensed investment advisor manage, oversee, place, and deliver and manage? And then what are the types of things they don't? So a licensed investment advisor, they don't manage your real estate, they don't manage your business, they don't do your hard money lending kind of activities, right? Those are out-of-network investments. So this is just a flow chart on what happens. Client desires real estate investment. LLC created to acquire real property. Seller manages the LLC. Seller gets 80% as an equity partner. DST gets 20. Cash flow gets divided 80% to him, 20% to the trust, and then the income and all the money that comes back to the trust ultimately goes back to the seller. So these are just a couple little handout pieces, but the quick reference sheet, I think, gives you a lot of the bullet points that might be appropriate. We have, and this could even be shared with clients, but if there's any other information that you want, or you're excited about this, you think this could be a good tool in your toolbox, and you want to know what kind of content we might have, how this might work, let us know. We love to get to know how you operate your practice, what kind of tools that you currently use. Are you using social media? What kinds? How do you do it? Do you do newsletters? Do you do mailers? Do you do email approaches to people? Do you do a door knocker? Door knockers and stuff like that. Whatever it is, you want something for your website to kind of add an additional specialization to what you do. Let us know. We can work through that with you, because we're masters of content creation on the subject, for what that's worth. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yes, we've been talking about 1031s. The key verbiage of 1031 is lifetime property. So my question to you is, on this trust, I can sell an income property and then turn around and invest into a business op?
You can invest in, there's no restriction or limitation on what you can have the trust invest into, as long as it's not like your personal residence or the boat for your dock or something like that.
So
But yeah,
something commercial?
you can invest in anything. You can invest in a business, you can invest in a private or public syndication, you can invest in more real estate for investment purposes, you can invest collectibles, stocks, bonds. Collectibles are kind of interesting because it depends on what you want out of the trust. So, for example, we've got to structure that promissory note and provide you with a security agreement for your money, because it's all your money. Everybody recognizes that's your money. You can have it all tomorrow. There's no penalty for early withdrawal. So if you had a 10-year note, but you wanted the money back in 2 or 3 or 5 years, you can have it. There's no penalty taxes. You want to extend it later, you can do that too.
Who would be the trustee in this situation?
So I'm the trustee, and so Reef Point LLC really is an entity created specifically for this role. So I'm really acting as an independent corporate trustee. I've been trained, vetted, and approved by the estate planning team, which is the sole access point for the Deferred Sales Trust. So the attorneys, the trustees, the investment advisors, we're all independent professionals, but we're all collaborating within the estate planning team umbrella, contractually and reporting wise and training wise, all of that kind of stuff. It's kind of like when I was an investment advisor, I had these compliance people above me. I have kind of a similar environment here. I've got compliance, supervisory boards, things of that nature. I'm not their employee, but I'm kind of bound. It's like you guys work for a broker, but you're not employees of that firm. You're an independent contractor, but you still have to conform to the ethical rules and the company policies and all that kind of stuff. So similar fashion there, if that helps. But did I answer your question about reinvestment? Could be in anything. And you can park it one place and then shift gears later. What if you can't find your ideal replacement property? What if we wanna just park it in, money markets and short-term T-bills are paying decent rates right now. What if you don't just wanna park it there and keep looking for the right property? Takes a lot of pressure off your shoulders, because you don't have to find something within 45 days.
Can we assign the trustee to like a CPA?
No, they have to be vetted, trained, and, sign various agreements, NDAs, non-disclosures, licensing, things of that nature. So, because we're very protective of our perfect track record, 25 plus years, we want to keep it going for another 25 years. It's not that we're a closed shop. There could be other people that want to become a trustee, go through the same. For me, it was like applying to go to the FBI Academy. That's kind of the level of scrutiny that I had to go through to be approved. There's only 15 people in the country that actually serve the role that I do as trustee. So it's not, there's tons of realtors that become members of the estate planning team, get additional training, and with additional training, it opens up the door to support and content and all that kind of stuff. And my firm, actually, my company provides a lot of that. The estate planning team provides the introductory training and things that you would need to kind of learn about this. And then as trustee, one of the things I do and support is training, content, all that kind of stuff, and various support. So
Who are you certified under?
well, it really comes to the people that I had to get certified, the estate planning team, the board of directors there, the tax lawyers, had to interview with the tax lawyers, get their blessing. I had to interview with a FINRA compliance officer and a broker-dealer compliance officer, because, because I'm working with the financial advisor and the client, right, and the tax attorney, and I'm kind of really the quarterback of this thing, because when the attorney is done with the transaction, then it's the advisor, the trustee, and the client moving on. Attorney's still there if we need them, right? If we're gonna modify or amend the note terms because the client needs a change in their income stream or whatever, the attorney will get access to update that legally and stuff like that, but it's really me. So I had to interview with people that supervise the advisors too. So, and then financial disclosures and, personal references, business references,
How do you see this dovetailing with like a retirement account? Like, people who have their money in a retirement account, 401k, they want to invest their money.
Index accounts.
Yeah, all these, like, because in my situation, I like to control that, but I can't really touch it. And it's kind of
it depends on what you're doing.
Okay.
Yeah, some people think that there's a lack of control. There's really not a lack of control, because nothing can be done that doesn't involve your written authorization and approval. Nothing. So we're working collaboratively. So like you may have a retirement account, you may have a financial advisor that you work with. The relationship that you have here is very similar to that. There's an investment advisor who's got to be trained and approved. That advisor can't be related or subordinate to you. That's an IRS rule set that's a very big part of keeping everybody protected and safe. So, your investment advisor could be trained and become an approved investment advisor for our DSTs. Could happen. He may not be able to be your advisor. You may have a 20-year relationship. If you get an audit, the IRS can say, oh, that guy's subordinate to you. There's a long-term pre-existing condition, and that defeats some of the independence that the trust needs to have. But you get to participate, obviously. You direct and or approve how the trust invests the money. So you don't lose control. Your money's not just doing what me or somebody else wants to do with it. Our job is really, as fiduciaries, is to provide you with data, information, experience, recommendations, pros and cons of different choices, so that you have enough information to make a good decision. Hopefully, if you're working with a professional advisor now, I don't care if it's a CPA, a financial advisor, even a doctor. Let's use the doctor analogy. You're ill, you go see the doctor. The doctor's a fiduciary just like we are. What does the doctor do? Okay, based on the examination of you, there's two options we have. We can go with this holistic and therapeutic approach, and here's the pros and cons of that, or there's the surgical option. Here's the pros and cons of that. Mr. Client, Mr. Patient, what option would you like us to pursue? You decide, and we put the plan together to execute what you've decided. but we've given you your options and the pros and cons up front. That's really our role. It's not to take away any of your control. If you want to change your note, yeah, we work together as a team. We're part of your team. You know, you already have fiduciaries in your life. You know, like I said, the doctor, the dentist, the advisor, CPA. We're just adding to your professional fiduciary team to help you with things that we specialize in.
How does Reef Point get paid?
Reef Point earns a trustee fee. So fee schedule overall on this is pretty transparent. First of all, every transaction we enter into, we do on a contingent basis, because sometimes we're the client's primary, you know, goal set to move forward the DST. Sometimes we're in the back seat as the backup strategy, like testing the waters of the 1031 exchange. So no fee is due at all unless you close the transaction and the DST is actually used. But we have to create it, build the structure, integrate before you close. Can't happen afterwards, too late, you know, you're already stuck. So the legal fee is typically going to be a percentage of the sale, a one-time fee of 1.5% of the first $1 million of the sale, 1.25% of anything above $1 million. So if it was $1 million sale, it'd be $15,000 would be the legal and setup fee, for example. If it was $2 million sale, you'd be looking at $27.5 would be your legal and setup fee. The trustee and the advisor operate on a asset under management tiered structure. So the first tier is up to $2 million of actual net proceeds that the trust is holding, investing, overseeing. At the lowest tier, you're looking at 1.1 to 1.5% annually. You get above $20 million, all in, less than 1%, usually about 90 basis points as far as that. And the expectation around that is that the performance of the investments that you've approved or directed the trust to engage in should deliver the target rate of return expressed in your note net of our fees. So if your note rate is, and the typical client is somewhere between 5 and 8% based on their risk tolerance, based on the amount of money they want, how deeply they want to be drawing from it, the term that they express that they want the initial note to be created for.
5 to 8% of what?
Of the net proceeds of sale that comes into the trust. And that can be distributed to them any way they want it. Deferred for a few years and then turn on income of whatever amount they want. They can do an amortized payout if they want, like a traditional mortgage. You know, like I said, there's 101 options, and that can be modified over time. So think of it this way. Think of your selling that appreciated real estate, and all the net proceeds of sale before taxes come into this trust created specifically for this purpose for you. It only holds your money. It's not commingled with anybody else's. And that trust acts in many ways as though it's your personal 401k plan. So when you talk about retirement funds, think of all your proceeds coming into your 401k plan, and the trust is acting sort of like that, which means that you get to make decisions about how you want to draw from your 401k plan each year. And to the extent you don't need any money, you don't pay any taxes, because you only pay tax when you take money out. Number two, you get to make the decisions on how the trust invests the money, and there's no restriction or limitation on what the trust can invest into. The only thing is that you have to approve it. I can't do it on my own. Investment advisor can't do it on their own. It has to be approved by you. Number three, like I said before, you only recognize and pay taxes on what you choose to receive each year. Not on the whole amount, just on what you take. The tax impact is going to be oftentimes a blend of ordinary income tax on the interest earned, or any amounts of principal that you're withdrawing would be a blend of capital gains, some appreciation recapture, and tax-free return of basis in a proportional fashion, right? Number four, we talked about living trust, estate planning, legacy planning considerations. This is an asset of yours. You can dispose of it any way you want. The best way, in our view, is to have a living trust for your family, because it's going to control and manage and distribute all of your assets. This is just one of them. So have a living trust, link that to the DST, so that your designated heirs will receive exactly what you want them to have, and they have control over the decision points about this. Cash it out, extend it, change the income, take some lump sum, and have income for the rest of it, whatever they want to do. Final comparison, asset protection. If you're aware, under the ERISA laws that created 401k plans, pretty asset protection bulletproof. Somebody sues you, gets a charging order or a judgment against you in the future, they can't go really after your 401k plan. Similar protection of the DST comes as a byproduct for what we do. You get sued, charging order or judgment down the road, they can't come after the principal in your
Really?
DST. Yeah.
Is there a case, do you have, case precedents that?
Well, yeah, well, let me explain quite simply, it'll make a lot of sense. When you do the DST, the trust is created and its initial business purpose is to enter into a purchase and sale transaction with you, really like it's almost like doing an option. It's like you're marketing the property for your client, you find the intended buyer, you negotiate with the ultimate buyer, the terms, the price, everything. The trust comes in and says, look, we'd like to have an option to buy the property ahead of your buyer for the exact same price and terms as an option, so that the trust can basically, receive the asset in exchange for a promissory note for exactly what would be coming out of your escrow, and simultaneously transfer it to your buyer. So they get exactly what they want. The trust gets the money, you avoid constructive or actual receipt of the money, but you've got a promissory note for the full amount. No taxable event has occurred at that moment in time, and you have a security agreement that protects you, which is why you get to approve how the trust invests the money, because that's your security. You're not going to do this unless you have security that's suitable to you, right? So now the trust has a promissory note. It owes you a series of payments contractually. Let's just say you had $1 million and you said, I just want $50,000 a year coming to me paid in monthly, paid out over monthly installments. Then you get sued. Well, if you get a judgment, the creditor is going to come up and they're say, okay, what do you got over there? What are your assets? You go, well, I got this DST. Great. Well, what's accessible? Well, the only thing that's possibly accessible is the income that the DST is paying you. The principal is not, because technically, legally, you don't own the principal. You own the right to receive the principal under a contractual obligation. They can't sue you and go after me and collect assets that the trust owns, because it's independent from you by design.
As long as you're the trustee.
Well, but it would have to be me or another approved trustee with the estate planning team. They can't take it away from me. I'm not a party to the action. And if I get sued, they can't take your money either, because it's like having 100% financing on your building to the bank. Bank's got first right of refusal. It's got, the collateral. Right? So if that guy gets sued, there's no equity to go after, because the bank's got he's got 100% collateralized interest. You've got 100% collateralized interest, but legally you're only entitled to what the income stream is stipulated in that contract. What if you see it coming, you come back to me and say, Greg, I don't know, might be something on the horizon. Could we modify that note and stop all distributions for, let's say, the next 2 years? Let's just turn it off. Then they go and sue you and they say, okay, we won, we got a judgment against you. What do you got? You go, well, I own an interest in this note, but it's not paying me anything right now. Nothing there for you. Sorry. And they can't come to me. So my creditors can't go after it, your creditors can't come after it. It's that simple.
What about if you have to collect a certain amount of your IRA now? You're of an age where you are. How does that affect the DST?
So there is no minimum or age requirement where you have to start drawing, and there's no date certain when the taxes all have to be paid. So for example, your death is not a trigger for having to pay taxes. If you die, it's still a contractual obligation that passes to your designated heirs. So they can continue with whatever the contractual arrangement you have made with me and with the trust, or stepping up as the note holder at that point, your successor trustee, for example. They can work with us to modify the note to meet the needs of your kids, right? Maybe they need a different amount of money coming in so they can divide that in equal portions to your 3 or 4 kids. Maybe they need some, cash out, just to take care of some things, and they'll pay tax on whatever they take out, but that's fine, but they could still leave a lot of it in there and just deliver it. They can extend it. What if we're coming up to the end of your note term? Can we modify it? Yes. Can we extend it? Yes. Is there an extra charge for that? No. What if they want to cash it all out? Is there a charge for that? No. simply can just cancel it, dissolve the trust, sign an agreement that we're terminating the relationship. We're essentially paying off the note early. Ever see a note prepaid? It's not terribly difficult, right? Notes get prepaid all the time. That's all that is. So, no worries.
I want to go back to what we were talking about a minute ago regarding protection of your asset in the trust and your cash flow. Would you say this is a good avenue for someone if they bought a business, put it in the trust up front as a protected thing? That way they can, have whatever cash flow they want coming at them. Just a thought. I'm just curious what your thought is on that.
I like how you're thinking outside of the box. No, it only makes sense to have the trust created and get involved in the transaction at the time you're selling. At the time you're selling, there's no real benefit to you to put your asset in and keep operating it, because you have no tax exposure at that point. I know you're thinking about the asset protection exposure, but that's why we have LLCs and CNS corporations and general partnerships and things of that nature. Those are designed to give you a modicum of asset protection, but only at the time of a sale. Then the timeline for our participation is mechanically to get everything done we need to and not hold up your closing date. 10 days to 2 weeks is typically what we would say mechanically, because we have a lot of people that come to the table late in the game. They just learn about it. They're already getting close to the end of their escrow, and they're just like, I just heard about this. Is it too late? Can I learn about this? And what are the options for me? Preferably around the time that you're either putting it on the market or starting to receive or consider offers, we'll typically provide you with language to include in a sales and purchase agreement or as an addendum to your agreement, which is just a very slight spin on the traditional 1031 exchange prototype language, which is in every pre-printed contract now. I used to have to handwrite that out when I was younger agent. But the prototype language I'm talking, buyer and seller agree that seller may, at seller's sole discretion and expense, utilize a 1031 exchange in connection with this transaction. Buyer and seller sign or initial that, right? We provide you language that basically says the same thing, except we expand it. Buyer and seller both agree. Seller may, at their sole discretion and expense, utilize 1031 exchange, deferred sales trust, charitable remainder trust, or other tax or estate planning strategy in connection with the transaction. It never interferes with the buyer's interests, so they don't care. And if you add that in to your contract or as an addendum, that satisfies the first IRS requirement, which is demonstrating intent.
Can you assist on the structure of the note?
Well, absolutely. That's part of what we do.
You're gonna not assist, but
We're gonna.
more. Can you do it?
Oh yeah. Oh, that's part of our.
Or do you have to get another attorney?
No. Our attorney manages everything. So we're embedding into the transaction team. The attorney's, really closely into the transaction side, making sure the language is right, providing out any other tax advice that the client may need, because he's there basically to represent the client's interest from a tax perspective. He's not there to manage the transaction. Like in a business, there's a transaction attorney typically in the middle. We don't take his person that role.
A lot of attorneys, they don't want to do creative stuff like a discount purchase option buyback kind of thing. Is this, or structure a note to do stuff like that? Is that something that
the note that we do is specific to the DST structure. So although our attorneys, they're tax attorneys. They deal with M&A transactions all day long. This is part of their world, Some of our attorneys own 1031 qualified intermediary companies because it's part of their world, and they need to have the ability to have that in place to deal with some of the tax stuff on other clients. So we're going to do everything surrounding the DST. Our involvement in the transaction itself is not taking the place of title, escrow, or a transaction attorney that's just managing the buy-sell side. But we're going to make sure that the proceeds can legally come out to the trust, so the client avoids actual or constructive receipt and the obligation to pay the taxes. That's the goal. If they wanted to do more, we can. But yeah, we do all of that. I'm the one that really, consults with the client on the terms of the note that they want. So that's deep discussion, and we start prepping them early. I give them written ideas and thoughts. Here's what we're going to talk about. Here's the things you should consider before we talk. So I want to pave the way and say, be thinking about your lifestyle needs, your budgetary needs, any big expenses that you may have, any cash you might need at the close, what kind of income stream you might need to supplement your other income in order to live your desired lifestyle, not just get by. You've worked hard. Enjoy yourselves. That's part of the definition of meaning of life, I think. So.
Is there any minimums on the amount of the DST?
Yeah, well, the minimums are not really about the minimum, the sales price. It's about the amount of taxes, as I said earlier, the amount of taxes we can help you defer. So if you look at the transaction, just assuming a direct and tax transaction, I don't care if you're planning to try 1031, but look at it from that framework. If I sold it and just took the money, what would my tax obligation be? If that tax obligation is going to be $100,000 or more, DST is something you should definitely consider. Or said another way, because sometimes you'll ask the client, they don't know, just like, okay, what did you pay for it? What are we selling it for? If that's at least $300,000 difference, that's viable, because you're going to pay tax on the difference between my basis, or in the case of investment property, my adjusted basis, because the depreciation is going to lower my basis, so it increases the amount that's taxable because of the recapture that occurs. So, but that's the simple answer. So in a business sale environment, I've got cases as low as $400,000 or $500,000 sales price, because in a business situation, almost always there's no basis at all. I started this company with a phone and a computer and a desk, and that's it. And then I built it through cash flow from operations and loans. And I grew it into $1 million enterprise, 100% taxable. Those people have no place else to go.
Well, there's one gentleman, the gentleman in the suit with the glasses in the corner. Yeah, you had a question earlier?
I just have a simple question about how long is the minimum DST investment?
There's really no minimum. We'll typically offer an initial note term of anywhere up to 10 years initially. But that note could be accelerated, meaning you could go a 10-year term but accelerate it in 5 or whenever. Or if you get close to the end of the term, we can extend it for whatever additional term up to 10 years. And you could redo that as long as you want. It's not something that you're going to want to do for just 1 year or 2 years, because there's fee structure involved, right? So if I'm only going to defer my taxes for 1 year, is it worth spending the money just to have 1 year worth of tax deferral? Probably not. But what makes more sense is people will think about that and say, well, yeah, but what if I find property in a year? I want to take all the money out. Well, then you forgot what I said. We use the tax deferred money to buy your property, and you control it. You identify it, you manage it, you control it, and we're using tax deferred money just like you would be doing in a 1031 exchange, but you're going to get better depreciation tax write-offs. You have the ability to get some step up in basis perhaps if you happen to die. You can control your cash flow better, and you can have other investments on the side that serve to provide for diversification, emergency funds, productively working for you either way. So that's, it's a good thing.
So, and then just to confirm, with 1031s, there's at no point you can put it into an insurance instrument of tax exemption, is that correct? It will always have to be tax deferred, is that correct?
Like an insurance product, like an
Yeah,
annuity
right.
or life insurance
Right.
product? Those are all eligible investments within the DST, sure. There's no, again,
Oh, so
no
then
restriction.
You could also do tax exempt then, right?
No exemption, no restriction.
Beautiful.
What do you want? You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
We're not gonna tell you what we're gonna invest your money in. We're gonna collaborate with you in a participatory conference, just like you're working with your own investment advisor. It's gonna be a similar arrangement and relationship, because we have to understand your investment history, your risk tolerance, how much risk can you tolerate? Super conservative, super aggressive, or like most of us somewhere in the middle on that line.
Can I ask you, just just the top two things, the difference between the Delaware Trust and the Deferred Trust.
Okay.
Deferred Sales Trust.
So,
Just two, not.
so Delaware Statutory Trust is a passive investment in real estate. So everybody's familiar with a REIT, real estate investment trust? It's basically a real estate syndication where you can buy fractional ownership into some real estate project put together by a sponsor, right?
Right.
The character of owning a REIT is the same as owning stock. It's considered personal property. Delaware statutory trusts are exactly what a REIT is. Passive investment, fractional investment in a real estate project put together by a sponsor who also puts together the financing ahead of time. So when you buy into it, you get the leverage that you're seeking without having to go and get your own separate loan. The difference between a REIT and a Delaware is that by statute, the Delaware Statutory Trust characterizes your ownership interest as fee simple ownership in real estate. Therefore, it qualifies for 1031 exchange treatment. That's the difference. REITs are personal property, you can't do 1031s into REITs. Delawares are considered ownership in real property, so they qualify. They were created specifically for that reason, because a lot of people were failing in 1031 exchanges, couldn't find what they're looking for, and so they went to the legislators or whatever and lobbyists, and they created a new law that says, let's call this thing a Delaware Statutory Trust so that we can get people 1031 treatment if they want to go into something like this.
Oh, okay.
And the deferred sales trust is not in it of itself an investment, right? It's a trust that provides tax deferral of your short and long-term capital gains, and the proceeds, and allows the proceeds to be reinvested into any asset classes that are suitable to accomplish the client's needs and objectives.
So why would anybody ever do a Delaware trust? They have a deferred trust.
No, because if you can't find your up leg,
Well, if you can't find your left leg, some people will go into the Delaware. Now, one of the differences between our DST and that DST is that the Delaware is like a REIT, they're long-term holds, and you have no control. You know, you may have some idea of how much income they plan to distribute, you know, and these things will return on average 5 to 7% total return on, because they're fee laden, there's a lot of fees involved. But you're locked in for typically 7 to 10 years.
I thought you could get out in 2.
Delaware's? No. No.
Deferred.
No, you're locked in. You have no control. There's no exit ramps. You gotta wait, pretty much. Once in a while, you'll have an offering that will
So-
have like partial liquidity windows where you can get a certain percentage of your money out every,
So
1/4
why
every
would
2
you
years.
do a Delaware if you can do a deferred trust?
Well,
That you're-
that's a question I ask myself every day. Why would you? Why would you? But some people just like real estate. They think that's good. They think they're gonna get, good, stable quarterly or monthly cash flow and hopefully some appreciation down the road. And they're just gonna set it and forget it because they have no choice at all. But with the DST, and then there's no diversification. You're all in to the Delaware, right? So you really have, but if you do our DST, if you want to be in passive real estate, you can, and there's lots of options. You can invest in Delawares, you can invest in REITs, you can invest in public and private syndications. You can get with your buddies and put together a little investment club and buy into something like that. You can buy your own active real estate if you want to.
And is it the Deferred Statutory Trust? It's a national.
Deferred Sales Trust?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Deferred Statutory Trust.
Deferred Sales Trust is authorized under federal law, so it's available in every state. We've done transactions in every state. Delaware Statutory Trust is the passive real estate investment. So when it says Delaware, that's kind of the REIT, the REIT with an expanded, tax treatment. So you could do 1031 exchanges, but yeah, I don't know why people would do that, And I'm not a huge fan of Delawares. I'm not a huge fan of REITs personally. I was an investment advisor for years, so I offered and managed and placed those from time to time. But I always found that I could do better selecting my own real estate, my clients. As I said before, I work, my core client base were real estate investors. you know, they want to see, touch, feel, and
Double-digit.
control, and they want to make the decisions. If they don't like the color of the mailbox, they want to paint it, you know, it doesn't matter. The REIT is like, you had nothing, you know, there's no control. So most of my clients didn't like those either, right? Because they had no control over what was going on. And there's some things that are bad, like Moody's, like you've heard of Moody's? So I was just evaluating Moody's REIT 2 that's been around since about 2018. And with COVID, that thing is sucking bilge water. Since 2019, it's down 17%. The sponsor has had to invest like $33 million just to keep the payment, and the cash flow is still below what the minimum debt service is. The banks have got them on what do they call it? Loan cash. I think what the term is, loan cash. But anyway, the banks are starting to exert pressure on these things, or having to scramble and refinance and have workouts with the bank, you know, and the sponsor's putting more money in. Just like, this is gonna take, you know, and real estate will go back up, it always does. But it's gonna take a while. So those, and all the while, you know, these guys charge big management fees, big syndication fees, they got front-end fees and back-end fees, and I'm thinking, how are these investors gonna get out of this particular REIT, you know, with even their money back, let alone, and they're not, and they haven't made distributions
I've got one right
for
now.
2 years.
Locked in for 7 to 10 years.
They stopped their quarterly distributions, so those people that.
They're doing a capital call on the borrower.
Yep,
So-
that's just one example, and so they stopped making their quarterly distributions to their investors, it's been 2 years. So what if I invested in that thing and I needed that income? I go, you're gonna give me $400 every month on my investment? Great, I need that. And then they stopped paying it for 2 years. Can I get out?
No. You're locked in for 7.
They're locked in. So maybe that's another way to answer your question. Why would you?
I don't know, with 2 Gregs up there.
I don't know. Yeah. 2 Gregs are better than 1.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.